I have several belly dance videos where I've worked a lot on the torso, upper and lower torso, and also the arms, but they were specifically for belly dance. There are some movements that we do in belly dance that we don't use in the Latin American dances or in the ballroom dances, but we're using always the same muscles. So the better you can articulate through your rib cage and through the upper portion of the back, it doesn't matter what kind of dancing you're doing, you'll have more control and more fluidity in what you do. So this one I will specify for Latin dance, but also have to say for the ballroom dancers, because we need to find the muscles in our back that help us to keep our frame, and we also need to be malleable in our rib cage for shaping and also for cushioning and partnering our partner. We can't be like a stiff cylinder, and many people believe this is true of the ballroom dances, but there's a great deal of movement and flexibility and control that we need through the torso. So we're just going to focus on the rib cage action, and the reason I'm going to use the chair is to help to keep the hips more stable. Many times when we start working on these rib cage slides, the hips will move immediately. It's much, much easier to do hip movement than to do back movement. But you need to have all that together. And if you're doing Latin American dancing, we're using this torsion and coiling through our spiral line all the time, where we're working strongly our rib cage and back against the pelvis. So the Latin American motion, the Cuban motion, is not simply a hip motion. And where in belly dance we often absolutely isolate, where we'll move the hips very much separate, but we're still stabilizing a lot through the upper torso to move the hips. Or we may do very small movements through the rib cage, trying to keep the hips quiet. So in Latin American dancing and in our ballroom dancing, we have a more fluid movement that's coordinated this way all the time, which we do use in belly dancing too, but we use a lot of those isolations. So we use the isolations today for the purpose of finding the muscles and gaining control and moving the rib cage in all different directions. The second video that I'll do, I'll simply put on a little bit of music in the background and go through the workout, so you can take 3 minutes, just go through all these different motions, and you'll have your practice for that day or for that week. But let's explain a little bit about what's happening. As I said, this is difficult for people to move through the thoracic area. Thoracic area of the spine, there's your lumbar spine, low spine, your cervical spine is your neck, down to the biggest bump there, C7, and that's where it becomes the thoracic spine or thorax. So that area of the spine has a mild curve. The thoracic spine, if you look at the curves of the spine, we have a little bit of a curve in the neck, a little bit of curve in the thoracic spine, opposing curve again in the lumbar spine, and then again down through the tailbone. So our spine is curving. Hopefully we'll lengthen through our curves, but there's a great deal of focus today in dance medicine on getting more flexibility through the thoracic area of the spine, because we can tend to take a lot of the stresses into the cervical area, the neck area, and into the lumbar. And so those areas we're always trying to find support and length. And our trunk muscles are very important in supporting the weight of the head and supporting the head upward, so that we don't imagine that our head is up by putting our chin up and pinching back here. So we're talking about the Latin dances, but in the ballroom dances, one of the things that we do have to do, I'm going to exaggerate a little bit the curve here in the thoracic area. We all have that curve, and if I'm just sitting normally, or many of our students actually from sitting at computers and sitting for a lot of time have overdeveloped the back area, and this is very contracted. So we need to be able to press the thoracic area. So even for the gentleman who doesn't have the frontal curve to the degree, obviously, that the lady would have, he has to press through the thoracic area. Sometimes we'll tell them to try to pick up their tie, and if these muscles are not properly engaged and developed, we'll always get this. We get the same thing with the ladies when we try to produce the curve and the lift up of the head will get a lot of that. The traps are engaging the upper part of the traps. So we want to find the muscles down there. So for that reason, I'm going to also practice the chest lift, which we do a lot in belly dance. I know there's some forms of dance where we do locks and drops. So we are not going to use those in ballroom dancing, but those muscles we are going to use. So not only the feeling of moving the ribcage forward and back, but we want that lift. Let's say that what some of our jazz teachers call the dancer's light, or the knot of the tie, as we're told for the gentleman. That's produced through the trunk muscles, through pressing out the thoracic area. And you notice that I'm not doing that through the neck and shoulders. So it's the muscles, the lower part of the trapezius, the rhomboids, the lats, all those muscles and that spiral musculature that works around our shoulder blades. We have to slide the shoulder blades down and towards each other and press this up. Now that's not the same either as opening the rib cage. So none of these exercises are going to be about opening or pushing through the rib cage. Even when I'm lifting my rib cage up, pressing the thoracic area, I've not opened this border. It's in a nice, strong vertical position. When you move your rib cage forward, you move it forward and back as if it's on a tray. We move it sideways as if it's on a tray. Not flaring the front of the rib cage, pinching the back. This is very difficult for us to find, especially in the ballroom dances. So word of caution there. So I will feel as though I'm widening my back, and I'm widening my back most easily through the three-dimensional breath, where you try to inhale in a way that your rib cage fills. So when you put your hands under your armpits, you feel the rib cage expanding this way, not contracting that way, but expanding, widening the back, three-dimensional breath. Another way to find that the musculature here and the border, you can find the border of your rib cage, is fairly flush. So if we press through our rib cage, the bones of the rib cage stick out, and if we're dancing that with a partner, then it's very angular against our partner. It also puts us in a back-weighted position. So we're finding that position of our rib cage on the tray, long spine, wide back. And then I'm moving forward in the slide and back, not doing it in the shoulders. Forward in the slide and back. Now on the lateral movement, I can press my hands here, or I can press into the chair and try to move myself to the side. You may find that you're more flexible on one side. I have a S-shaped scoliosis, so I know I'm probably moving much more to my left side. So I always try to compensate the side I know is tighter and move myself a little stronger in that side. So you can use the mirror for that. We can also practice this in a doorway where you can press. The first time that people try the lateral movement, often nothing moves and their face gets tense and everything tightens up. But just thinking about it, trying to do it, your brain is learning. And many times if I have a belly dance class, the second or third class, I'll see the ladies getting the ribcage moving lateral, and it would never move there before. Same thing with the gentleman when we start to work on the Latin motion. We're trying to get mobility in the ribcage. You can't move it. It goes like this. But a couple times, just making that connection to the brain, it will start to move. So I'll do another video where you can just put the video on and go through the practice, and it takes 2 to 3 minutes to go through all the movements and practice doing them. So we've got the front and back, we've got the sideways. When we do the chest lift, I'm still keeping this long line in my back and in my rib cage. To me, it almost feels like a stem that's being squeezed. Pressing up, not pressing out. One of the reasons I like to practice this also for the ballroom and for the Latin is the way I have to use the muscles in my back. When we're moving the ribcage forward, we are bringing those scapulas down towards each other. But when we lift the knot of the tie or we lift the dancer's light, we really feel that V of the scaps moving down. Also, once you're moving sideways, you'll begin to feel the muscles working around the waist. If you add the scaps, okay, sliding your scapula or your shoulder blade down and pushing it to the side, sliding it down and pushing it to the side. Now you're getting a more integrated movement, a movement that's going to help in your expression in your Latin and your ballroom dances. And you also activating much more the movement. So I can do it here. I'm not thinking actively of working my scapulas, and now I'm thinking pressing down with the scaps. If we combine the forward and the back up and the sideways, we can make the box. Front, side, back, side, front, side. Again, paying attention to where you feel tighter. Reversing that. Make sure you do both sides evenly. When we round out the corners, we get a ribcage circle. Also, we'll reverse the ribcage circle. In my belly dance classes, I always have people start really, really big. This sort of gross muscular movement, really, really large movement. And to learn things, you have to exaggerate it. And then we start to make it smaller and smaller and smaller. The smaller you go, the closer you get to the muscles that are close to the spine. That's where you get the most finely articulated movement and the best control. Start big, go smaller and smaller. As you go smaller, it becomes harder to feel it. So always start there and come down. And then also when you pick up the speed, it's difficult. But those are things to work towards. For the diagonal, we'll take the rib cage diagonally forward, diagonally back. Now the obliques, they're working all the time on these actions, but they're really getting involved now on these diagonal movements, and then to the other side. I'm always trying to keep my shoulder line open and not push with the shoulders. It's very common with our students when you're first trying, and maybe you'll do that, maybe you'll really tighten up through the shoulders, but become aware that we're trying to get to those trunk muscles for that. So lateral slide, forward and back slide, four corners, circles, and the chest lift and drop. So these are the exercises that are more specific than to the Latin and the ballroom. But you can benefit by looking at those belly dance videos. We'll also work on the lower portion of the torso. So I'll do a video more specific for the Latin American dances on the lower area. But almost any of the belly dance exercises that we do there are also applicable. And we'll get the lower portion of the trunk moving.